Hi there, my name's Paul Langlois from the Tragically Hip and the Paul Langlois Band, and you are listening to the Northern Report.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, friends. Thank you for tuning in to another installment of the Northern Report podcast. I am your host, Sean Burns, coming right at you today from a pretty nice hotel room here in a downtown Little Rock, Arkansas, United States of America. Here tonight for a show with Corb Lund and the Hurtin' Albertans at Sticky's Rock and Roll Chicken Shack. Seriously, it's the name of the joint. It's a pretty cool spot too, I might say. Been having a good run down here the last couple weeks, and we're just winding her down with a handful of shows. If you are a fan or a friend or an enemy or a listener at home there in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, here to remind you that you can catch the LC3, Grant Siemens, Joanna Miller, and yours truly at the Royal George Hotel in Transcona, Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada on Sunday, December the 3rd from 4 to 8 p.m. We'll be at the Times Changed High and Lonesome Club for our very first Lost Country Christmas special on Thursday, December 21st. By the time this interview gets released, there's a strong chance that tickets will be available, so keep your eyes open wherever you've got them pointed towards. Very excited for today's guest, truly a legend from one of the most legendary Canadian bands of all time, not just Canadian rock bands, but Canadian bands. On the show today, I chat with Paul Langlois from the Tragically Hip. We're batting off the country music course again. I know I have done that a couple of times in the past, notably, I guess, Slow Leaves and Jerry Legier come to mind for previous guests that are, living their musical lives outside of the country music box. But I'm interviewing some folks that interest me, and perhaps they interest you as well. And we had a really good conversation. Paul Langlois, very generous with his time and his stories. I don't really think he needs much more introduction than that, but let's give him one anyways. Paul Langlois joined the Tragically Hip in 1986, a couple of years after the group was initially formed. The band remained active in recording and touring until their final show, witnessed by 11.7 million viewers when simulcast on CBC TV on August 20th, 2016 in their hometown of Kingston, Ontario. The passing of legendary frontman Gord Downie in 2017 signaled the official end of the Hip as a performing unit. Beginning in the bar rooms and working their way through the ranks into the arenas and stadiums of Canada, the Hip found moderate and regional success in the United States, highlighted by appearances on Saturday Night Live in 1995, as well as being part of the interesting and diverse lineup of performers at Woodstock 99. The 5 members of the Tragically Hip were named to the Order of Canada in 2017 and were inducted into the Canadian Music Hall of Fame in 2002. The Hip released 13 studio albums, 1 live album, 1 EP, and more than 50 singles over a 33-year career. 9 of their albums reached number 1 on the Canadian charts. They won 17 Juno Awards, and between 1996 and 2016, the Tragically Hip were the best-selling Canadian band in the country. Like Hockey Night in Canada on CBC every Saturday night, or at Tim Hortons on every block in Winnipeg or Hamilton, Ontario, the Tragically Hip have become a part of the fabric of our nation. I've always been interested and intrigued by Paul Langlois. I spent a bunch of time listening to his latest release with the Paul Langlois Band, and I've been a 30-plus year fan of the Tragically Hip. Friends, help me welcome him to the show, Paul Langlois, on the Northern Report podcast.
How you doing?
Doing good, man. It's not yet the harsh Winnipeg stuff that's about to come, but it's coming.
Yeah, it's coming.
You know what it's like out here.
Oh yeah.
Spend much time out here over the years?
Yeah, Winnipeg was kind of our. It was the first place we flew to. We happened to have a couple of connections through our management agents, and so we got a couple of gigs out there, and actually flew, which was our first time kind of flying as a band with our gear in the bottom, and yeah, and then there was kind of a few funny things that happened, and we just ended up getting some attention in Winnipeg of all places, and it kind of was a bit of a catalyst for us getting attention in other places eventually.
Because you guys got fired or something like that, right?
Yeah, so we were playing a club called the Diamond Club, and it was supposed to be, I think it was supposed to be 3 nights, maybe 4, but and we were playing like 3 sets at the time, and the owner walked in after the second set, or in the middle of the second set, and manager came back and said, "You guys are fired." So we didn't even play the third set. He thought we were going to be a bit dancier. I mean, it wasn't a disco club, but it was a bit dancey, and we were kind of more rock and roll. And so then we were pretty depressed about it, and back to the motel. And then it was like, we didn't fly that time. And so we're going to get in the van and drive back to Kingston, which is an insane long trip.
Yeah. Like 26 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we were bummed about it. And then our manager called and said, "You guys ever hear of Donnie Lalonde?" And, he was a famous boxer. He fought Ali, and he had a club in Winnipeg. I don't know I'm assuming he's from Winnipeg. But anyway, Donnie Lalonde hired us at a club called Corner Boys to replace our Diamond gig, and a guy named John Kendall, who was writing for the Winnipeg Sun and is now a friend of ours, but he just picked up on it, and he wrote, a big story about Donnie Lalonde saved it. And we played Corner Boys. It was a smallish club, but it was packed all 4 nights, and it became a bit of a story at the time. So it was all good by us. So then we came back to Winnipeg many times. We played the Zoo, we played everywhere there.
Man, you guys played the Zoo?
We sure did.
Fuck, that's hilarious. We was just driving by there the other day with my wife, and the Zoo, they knocked it down a few years ago, and they're putting up this big ugly condo, and they're getting it done really quickly. And I was like, wow, the Zoo, like, that's a legendary place. And we both of us are from Ontario and moved out here like 10, 12 years ago, and it was it was totally a dump when when it was still open when we were here. And she said, "Was the Zoo really legendary?" I'm like, fuck, everybody played there. Like, everyone played there in the day. So I didn't know you guys did.
Yeah. Oh yeah, a couple times.
Wow.
And and we were proud to play there, and we just ended up having a thing in Winnipeg, and it was kind of one of those, if I could only really pick, I mean, we had Kingston down, and they do say, some people say, you gotta be able to have a crowd in your hometown. If you can't get that happening, then maybe it's there's something not quite right. And so we had a crowd in Kingston, and then Winnipeg for just those crazy reasons, and London, Ontario. And so it was just kind of like, okay, well, let's just build on this. We barely touched Toronto, and it was just like, you know what, let's play these cities and keep coming back, every 6 weeks, and build up crowds there. And it ended up serving us well just to have people that knew who we were. And this is long before we recorded. We might have recorded our first baby record, maybe like our first EP. We called it the baby record, and but no, we hadn't actually recorded it by then. But then when we did record it, we knew that London, and we were going to do another cross-country tour. We did about 4 of them without having recorded it, just in the van. And then once we put the EP out and a couple of videos, we knew that London and Winnipeg were going to be, more over the top than the rest of the cities who didn't really know us from a hole in the ground at that point.
Man, that's wild. Like my first tour with a band, leaving Toronto and going to Northern Ontario, like, up to Thunder Bay or whatever, was 2002, 2002, I think. And that was vastly different than touring is today. But when you guys went out on it on your own, like, you're just a band who probably booked your own tour at that point, right?
Yeah, pretty much, until we hooked up with management. And though that Winnipeg thing, we had manager. He's our manager again, Jake Gold, and he was our manager for the first 17 years. Then we took a 17-year break from each other, and now he's been our manager since COVID. And so it was his buddy that worked at an agency in Winnipeg, and but yeah, we did these tours in a van a lot of times. Booking it ourselves and just asking friends and stuff, who do you know in the city or whatever. And we crossed the country probably 4 times in a van, and that was the key to us. We got along well, and that was proven to ourselves that we can actually do this and have some fun. But it was relentless. It's for 20 somethings. It's not for 50 somethings.
No.
I mean,
yeah,
it's a tough little grind.
Yeah, it's grueling, and I'm sure at all times of year too. Like, you guys probably rolled out here in the wintertime as well.
We did. Fuck. We actually did.
Yeah.
A few times. And, we got lucky enough that things in general went well. And we eventually got onto a bus. But the first, 8 or 9 years, we were leaving after the show, and we had a long drive. What's next? Well, Winnipeg. Okay. I guess next gig's Regina, and it's just like, so you got to leave after the show if you're playing the next night. And, so anyway, we were all willing.
How long were those tours, those early ones?
We would cross probably, if I had to guess, it was like kind of 6 weeks, 6-week tour.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd go right across because we did the Maritimes as well. And to especially after the EP came out, we really felt like we had something, and that we could turn on a room and really make our mark live wise. And we also back then, I think, were smart enough to know that songwriting was the key. We need to get better. We need to keep writing. This isn't gonna go anywhere if we don't just keep writing better songs and keep working on that all the time. And because there were 5 of us doing it, it was a bit easier. And the live thing came pretty naturally, and we didn't have to work that hard on it. But certainly recording was a big learning curve, and songwriting too. Just trying to find our voice, kind of thing.
So when you guys are doing 3 set nights in the early days, you must be padding those set lists with cover songs when you guys were starting out, right?
Yeah, we were basically a cover band. And we were actually hiding, as opposed to padding with covers. We were known as a cover band, and we were hiding our originals within those covers. And it was a big kind of influence because we were writing songs like the songs we were covering, which was kind of really early 60s British kind of R&B stuff. And it was like the Yardbirds and early Stones and that kind of thing. And so when we were writing songs, they were kind of like that kind of, it's not like simple, but it's very R&B, almost 12-bar blues, but amped up and hyped up and quicker and that kind of thing. And so that's where, and then eventually we felt like, okay, we got it stretched out a bit, and we got enough songs to make a little record, and we kind of just went from there. But that was a big influence. And I think it was good. We knew so many covers, and we could play them, and so that's what we all knew. We all knew that we could play live and we could turn on a room, especially if we're playing Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
Hmm.
By Saturday night, we knew we could fill it. And it's a better night anyway, but, we knew that the word of mouth was going to spread in this little town like Trenton, Ontario, or anywhere, just kind of like, oh yeah, word will get out. And sure enough, it did. We were kind of cocky 24-year-olds or, 23-year-olds but not cocky in an impolite way. I mean, we were, we were very polite, and we also, treated the fans well. We remained a mystery. It's totally different now, where you basically gotta, show your family pictures. Fans expect a lot more. They want to know you. But back then, we just kind of kept cruising. We were just on the road always.
Yeah, you could really, really like lean into the mystique in the old. I just had this conversation the other day with a friend of mine who is like really is turned off by the way things kind of have to be these days with the social media stuff. He's like, man, in the old days, like if you didn't have a magazine, you had to have the record cut and hope that there was a photo of the band in there so you knew what they looked like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we leaned into that. We liked being a mystery. And even if you take Toronto as an example, I mean, we'd go in and play the Hotel Isabella and, and then leave, right after the show. And we weren't kind of part of that scene. And, it took us a long time to sort of think to ourselves, I guess we're not that mature, that, we could be friends with these other bands like Blue Rodeo or, Sky Diggers most especially. But, all these other bands. Whereas when we first started hitting Toronto, we'd hit it once every 2 or 3 months and in a small club, and then we'd go, eventually the Horseshoe and then up to the Diamond. And, we just had that kind of desire to be mysterious and unknown.
It's cool that you guys did. Well, you didn't move to Toronto as a band ever, did you?
No, we never did. Gord Downey and I moved there after our girlfriends at the time, who became our wives, had graduated and were moving to Toronto for, post undergrad school.
Mm-hmm.
And so Gord and I moved up there, and Gord ended up staying there. He never came back to Kingston. I mean, he came back to visit, but
right.
He lived in Toronto from then on. And my wife and I moved back to Kingston probably 8 years later. And then Johnny moved up to Toronto probably 10 years later, a couple of years after we moved back to Kingston, and he has stayed there. So okay. Gord and Johnny have been in Toronto for years. Our management's been there. Obviously, our record company, Universal's there. And so we had to be there a lot. But the other two guys, Robbie and Gord Sinclair, stayed in Kingston the whole time. And we've been back in Kingston for probably almost 30 years.
That's awesome, man. Like my wife and her sister, they grew up in Kingston, and they all went to the same summer camp as your kids, and they're all like around the same age. My sister-in-law, I think it's like the same age as your daughter, one of your daughters.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so, RKY.
RKY, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a beautiful thing for a lot of kids.
Yeah, it seemed like it was a real life changer for my wife and her sister for sure, and that's pretty cool. And I got another little connection I meant to tell you about. Is I was at the show. It would have been December '96, Maple Leaf Gardens, Trouble at the Hen House. I was 13. And I've got a signed snare drum head from all you guys, because my dad's buddy was Mike Cormier, who was working for Johnny.
I love Mike, and he's actually Mike still works for us. He came down a few weeks ago just because Robbie is our art director in general for the whole time, with merch and album covers and all that kind of stuff. And Robbie was doing a big photo shoot, so Mike was down here for 3 or 4 days. He's classic individual, and he did a lot of work for us over the years, as Johnny's guy.
Yep.
But he's multi-talented. He's a good drummer himself, and Gord Sinclair and I golf with him, many times, and he's also a classic golfer to watch.
That's awesome. That's funny, man. I'll have to tell him.
I mean that in a quirky way.
I believe it. I believe it. So, okay, I had some varying early information on you and the band that I wanted to confirm. Were you driving a cab or something and picked Johnny up at some point along the way?
Yes, I was. Yeah, I drove a cab when I was driving cab when the band first started, and the band first started without me. Mm-hmm. Stupid as they were, and but they had a sax player who was 40, and he was a great guy. He unfortunately just passed away this past year, but Davis Manning, and he was classic. But they were all 20, and they were all in university except Johnny was still in high school. He was in grade 13, and anyway, so they had a good thing going, like at Queens and kind of a biker bar in town. And so I was driving cab, and I was best friends with Gord kind of through high school. And so he put me on the guest list whenever they played a show. And because I was a cab driver, I could take an hour and a half off kind of thing and go see the show. So, so I knew Gord Downey the best, and I knew the other guys like somewhat. Johnny, I didn't know as well. He's a couple of years younger than me, but I knew he was. He knew who I was. And I saw him running down the street one day, and I was in my cab, and he was, he was running like it was at night, and like not a little jog. I mean, he was running from something. And so I just pulled over and was like, "Hey, Johnny, get in." And he was so grateful. And because he didn't have any money, and I knew where he lived, and I was like, "Oh, no worries at all. Like, you're just 12 blocks up this way." And I dropped him, and then eventually, probably a few months later, Gord Downey called and asked if I'd like to join the band because Davis had left, this player, and I'm convinced that I got Johnny's vote because I saved his life that night.
You must have been the youngest cab driver in town.
Well, no, I was 21. So yeah, I mean, but I had a buddy that was the same age. So yeah, we were certainly a couple of the younger guys. And back then there was a lot of ropes to learn as far as getting, because you get cheated out of your fares and that kind of thing. It's not so, it comes over a computer now, but it used to be with a dispatcher, and everyone lied as to where they were. And anyway, so we learned the ropes of it, and I actually really enjoyed it for that year and a half.
Were you playing in bands around that time as well?
I was not. No, I had just learned how to play guitar. I didn't learn until first year university. There was a guy on my floor. This is at Carleton, and he's like, "Hey, you want to buy this guitar for $100?" And I was running out of money. And this is in October. I was running out of OSAP, which is lends money, the government lending you money in Ontario, and I thought, yeah, I got $200 left. Yeah, I should spend half. And so while I was driving, I moved back. I didn't go back for second year, and was just going to take a break driving cabs. And when I would get home, I was teaching myself how to play guitar, and I bought like a Beatles book and a Bob Dylan book, and just, with the chord charts, and just eventually taught myself how. And then the Hip didn't hire me because I was like a stellar virtuoso or anything. It was just kind of like, well, Paul knows how to play, and they knew I could sing because I had sung together quite a few times in various weird situations. And so I just kind of learned on the fly, and I think my particular style, which some people may call simple, is based on the fact that I wanted to play within my limitations. Basically, I didn't want to make any mistakes, because all of a sudden I was playing rock and roll tunes, 60s rock and roll tunes, and but also others thrown in. Train Kept a Rolling, but that's a 60s song, even though Aerosmith is the most famous. And so I just stayed within the limits and would learn on the side. And and prided myself in not making any mistakes.
Damn. So when did you feel like it finally started to click for you, like as a guitar player?
As a Yeah, as a guitar player is different. Like it clicked for me the very first gig I did, which was at the Belleville Yacht Club, and it clicked for me because I knew I could sing backups, or I thought I could sing backups, and but I never tried it. Um, Barely ever sung into a mic unless it was at a friend's place or something, a couple times. But I knew at that gig that, okay, I can sing backup. So now all I have to do is like D, A, G, whatever, E, A. I knew all those things,
Mm-hmm.
um, and then yeah, gradually, I wouldn't say it had clicked for me guitar wise through the EP, although certain songs felt like they were clicking. And then once we sort of just got on the road and were playing, I think I just got better and better at expanding my sort of guitar horizons somewhat. Now, Robbie's the lead player. He would argue with me and say, no, he's a rhythm player, but he was kind of taking the solos. So my focus was to really play with Johnny and Gord with the rhythm section and be exactly in time with them. And just so I have it, so we're going to the dressing room after the show and no one's saying, you know, you're not quite up to scratch. So I just kind of really worked on that end, and getting better on the guitar kind of happened just accidentally, kind of through that.
Well, man, you there's no replacing hours on stage, And if you guys are doing, 6-week tours or whatever, you're playing, how many nights a week would you guys be playing in those days? Because you're not doing 6-nighter gigs like the country bands of the day, probably, right?
Well, I mean, we were certainly 5 a week, but six on average, 5.5, because we were doing a lot of 6 nights a week. But you're so right. Hours on stage, especially kind of in a team environment,
Mm-hmm.
which we were, and kind of like, okay, we're going to fucking show these people, and we're going to dig in, and we're going to write the set list with that in mind, and really play with the mood and play with the kind of variety, but really get in their face, not in a metal way, even though, hey,
Mm-hmm.
metal's fine, like it, but the approach was just in a rock and roll sort of way, and let's blow the doors off the place. And yeah, that's how you get better if you're playing with a band.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's interesting that you said that you just tried to lock in with the bass and drums, because I was going to ask you about that. So is that something that you stuck to over the years, or did that change as you kind of got better and you guys became a better band?
No, I don't think it ever changed. No, I wanted to. I mean, Robbie and I, we can both admit we didn't listen to each other really. I mean, we had the odd discussion, but like about what are you playing here and what are you playing there, and we had each other in the distance, in the monitors kind of thing. But no, I was playing. I wanted to be exactly on the snare, especially, and exactly with Sinclair. Who's sometimes Gord on the bass, he gets pretty melodic there. And,
Mm-hmm.
so I would either go melodic with him, or probably more often, be a little kind of straighter and in time with the drums. I don't think that ever changed. I think it always was an important thing. It would be a song by song example, but I would say that never really changed, that goal.
That's wild, because I think sometimes, like I've been convinced that it was like you and Rob sitting down and sort of sorting out the space and sorting out the parts together, because so often those two parts kind of sound like, those two guitar players kind of sound like one big part. And like the Stones can do that. And, the other sort of two electric guitar bands that come to mind, I guess Guns N' Roses kind of could do that in the early days. But like, you know what I mean? It's like, it feels like one part. And if you didn't sit down and figure that shit out with him, then wow, like that's amazing. Did it come from jamming, like as a band?
Yeah, I mean, Yeah, it came from jamming, like actual jamming,
Yeah.
like improvisation. And then there was another, like our first producer, a real one who did up to here and Road Apples, Don Smith, who's a big shot to us.
Mm-hmm.
He panned the guitars, and it was like he saved my life. Like it was just kind of like because I find I love AC/DC, of course, and I love all these bands, but the guitars aren't panned, so you can kind of perceive the rhythm guitar back there, but it's kind of like it's overtaken at times. And I was always panned hard left. Robbie always panned hard right. So if you remember, like in cars and stereos, you could switch just to the right side or just to the left side. And you could do that with Beatles music, that where the drums are on the left and the vocals are on the right or whatever.
Yeah.
And Robbie and I were always panned, at least for our first few records and for most of the records after that. And so that allowed us to, I think the weaving in and out of each other was helped by that. Like you don't really perceive it because you're just in your living room or in your car and you're hearing all of it. And you're right. It sounds like almost like one guitar part. But if you pan it over, you can hear just me. I recommend that. But you can also pan right and just hear Robbie.
It's like it's hypnotic, and a couple of songs come to mind just based on what we talked about. And the first one would be Pigeon Camera. Like I listened to that the other day and like really tried to hone in on both of the electric guitar parts, and even what you do in the solo section, he's playing this really beautiful melodic solo, but like your approach to the rhythm guitar is super unique, and you're able to fill a lot of space without playing a lot of notes, which is something that like no one taught you that. Like that's just you listening, right? Like it seems like a really mature approach to playing music for a guitar player, especially a young one.
Well, thanks. I'm glad you feel that way. I mean, I love that song. And remember listening to it when the mixes came in, because they came in about a week or two after we got back from England from the recording. And it was just like, wow, this really turned out great. And I was not necessarily just thinking of me, as everybody, like the solo, as you say, Robbie soloing in that is just beautiful. And, that was just a nutty riff and a nutty song. Johnny brought that riff in, and drummers play guitar differently than everyone else, I find. And he had this riff, and it was like, wow, that's a crazy little riff. It's just like, wow, it's so different. And so I really was honestly trying to honor that riff because I was going to play it. And and then there's just something nutty about that song where you're I don't know, it's just so chimey and so I don't know how that happened. I appreciate that you think that because, and all that whole record fully completely was that was a one record where we recorded all separately. It drove us crazy. We were there. It was a 6-week recording process. And by the end of the 5th week, we didn't have anything done. And then did the drums for 2 days with the bass a little bit. Then the bass for one day, then me for one day, then Robbie for one day, and then the vocals and the backups. And it was just like, we had been playing for 5 weeks, so we're so well rehearsed. But our producer, Chris Tangarides, we loved him, and he was so great. May he rest in peace. He just frustrated us because we just like the red light never came on. It's like, we got to get this record done. Like we're flying home in a week and a half.
Yeah.
Anyway, so maybe it's something to do with that because, I went first, so it's more Robbie that played whatever he wanted.
Did you guys continue to make records in that way?
No.
Yeah.
No, we preferred the everyone at the same time. And as a general rule, that's what we did.
Yeah, I mean, especially when a band like you comes up through the ranks and plays the bars and has played so many nights together, and then rehearsals and stuff. It's like, it's really something special when you can capture a real performance.
Yeah, and that was our thing. We knew that was us at our best. I mean, I play way better if I'm playing with the band. I hate fixing things,
Hmm.
because you can fix things, especially when Pro Tools came in, um, in kind of around 2000 or whenever that was, maybe late 90s, and all of a sudden you could change everything, and oh, I don't like that, and it was just I was if I had to fix anything. I knew in my heart that it wouldn't be as good as if I had a fucking nail to take with the band. And so then it comes down to somehow trying to get the energy of a crowd being in there, because the crowd is so important. Smiling faces, people dancing, all that is so important that it provides an extra like 20% of energy. And so in the studio, the big challenge, if you're going to do it live off the floor and we're all record together all the time, you somehow have to find how to get that energy, because there's no crowd there. It's just the five of you and the people that are recording.
Hmm.
And so that's the big challenge. But we stayed true to that challenge, because we knew that certainly our ace in the hole is that we could play well together and get good takes.
Yeah, it's a band. It's not like a one guy who wrote the songs and has five hired guns, or who whatever, different people every song.
Yeah, yeah, for us, and we were lucky that way. It always felt like we were just on a little team, and we were best buddies, and it was just, and we were nice to each other. It wasn't weird, like no one was ever kind of like, oh, what are you doing there?
Mm.
That's no good. It's just like the good ideas just rose to the top, because people would bring them up, as we were writing, what was that thing we were working on? How about that? Let's try that one, and it was just kind of like, it wasn't antagonistic or anything like that. Everyone was just motivated and hopeful that their ideas, the band liked their ideas. And it was random as far as how many musical ideas any one member would get on a record, because we just went with the best ones.
How did you guys do that? Like, how could you remain, partners and collaborative in this cohesive situation for that long? Like, do you have any advice you could give people in bands? Because it's really, really hard when you're working that closely with people and traveling with the same people all the time too.
Yeah, tough to say. I'm trying to think of advice, but it's the most important thing, I think, in a band. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you can have solo artists. I'm doing my solo band. I love the guys in the band, but in the end, it's my decision. And with a band, especially young bands starting out, it's the simple thing. It's respect. It's listening. Sometimes it's not even communication. It drove Gord Downey crazy that we didn't communicate more. Like little things like that were bothering us or that were bothering him. We kind of let the little things go. And the big things are the songs and the schedule. And, what are we trying to do here? And by the way, I'm not going out on any more 12-week tours. We need to go. We came up with a rule: we're going out for 3 weeks and back for a week. That's how we tour, and that was a number of records in. But so we were just able to stay on the same page. Matter of fact, we were able to. I credit Johnny too a lot, because he didn't have kids, and we all did. We all had young kids, and so it started to get a bit stressful. But Johnny, he went with the flow. He's like, yeah, you want to go out 3 weeks back 1 week, because everyone wants to see their kids. They're like 2 years old or whatever,
Yeah.
varying ages, but they're little. And so, I mean, advice wise, it's got to be respect, I think, and I think there's just so much luck involved with the combination of people. We were so lucky to be from the same high school, and Gord and I were best friends, and Robbie and Sinclair had been best friends since they were like two, right across the street from each other. So I think that solidified a lot of things, and Johnny fit right in. with everybody. So I do think there's luck involved. I don't mean to be discouraging, but I think the combination of people is something that you have to kind of look for and assess. And that's what happens. And that's why bands break up sometimes. It's like, this guy's just not on the same page, and or we can't do it. So I think some luck is required.
Did you guys make all the decisions like that? Like, I mean, what songs made the record, what sequence the songs were on the record, the set list, like what time, what's lobby call in the morning when you guys were in the van? Like, are these all collective decisions the whole time?
Yes, I would say so. I mean, as we got, more popular on a tour bus, and we'd have a road manager, well, she would or he would make the decision on what time lobby call was. But those kinds of decisions, should we leave after the show, what the set list is. I mean, there's certain people who had certain skill sets. Like Gord Sinclair wrote the set list for basically our first 25 years, and then he quit. And we're like, you can't quit. And he's like, no, I quit. I'm not writing the sets anymore. So Robbie did it for maybe the next 2 years, and then back to Gord, and then in the end it was me. But it's just sort of it's not like we would delegate that responsibility, but it was just obvious that someone had the desire to do it, knew how it should be. Like with the set list, Sinclair, he just had a good sense of when to play what, and it only gets more difficult the more songs you have, and so yeah. And as far as what songs made the record, yeah, it was consensus or nothing. All five of us needed to like the song. We needed to believe it. We needed to be into it. And if anyone was kind of like, eesh, I don't know, the song wouldn't make it. And fortunately, we had enough good ones to choose from, in our opinions at the time. And so yeah, I'm not saying every discussion went great, and that we didn't have our tough times and our down times. And the older we got, probably the more tough times we had with kind of getting along, or certain decisions, especially scheduling and charity. Charity's a tough one too. What to do and how to do it and when. But we would hash those things out. So it wasn't like you couldn't avoid it for long if you cared about something. And that's what it comes down to, is we all cared about our reputation and the quality of what we were doing. And so, yeah, it was, we did it all together, and we managed to remain great friends. And then we were hit with Gord's news, and that really obviously only brought us back to much closer together.
Yeah,
we would have kept going, and we were certainly, as I say, great friends. But that with solo records and kids, all of a sudden the kids are in their 20s, and it's kind of like there's just kind of a lot of shit going on. It got tougher to be to get together, to even schedule times to get together. A couple guys in Toronto, and we got a studio outside Kingston, and you record, and writing session or a recording session, and then the three Kingston guys go home because it's only 25 minutes away, and the two Toronto guys, Johnny and Gord, had to stay over because Toronto's 2 hours away. And it's just kind of like, well, they expressed, this doesn't seem right because we're not starting till noon. And we're all like, well, why? We're quitting at midnight. Why wouldn't I go home? And so then, a mature decision. We decided whenever we were in Bath, we all stay over.
Yeah,
just keep it all even. You got to keep it all even.
It's like when the home team stays at a hotel during the playoffs.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah.
Man. And and another key, and I would advice to younger people, unless there's just one guy writing all the songs and it's a solo project, or maybe even a band where it's just one girl or guy doing all the songwriting. if it's a band, the group songwriting credit, it saved our lives, and it's ruined many a band not having one,
I bet.
because all of a sudden the money's different, and when the money's different, nobody's happy except for that person.
And you guys got on that early on too, didn't you?
Yes, very early, before
Yeah.
we really even started. Yeah, it was a very early conversation, um, and we all were on the same page, and it was like, yep, that's going to help us keep together.
Man, you guys went through so many different things in culture and the music business in your time together. If you look at like social media, and you mentioned Pro Tools, and then you talk about like the advent of the compact disc. I guess, when you guys started out, was it mostly vinyl still and cassettes, or and the reason I ask is, were you thinking of your sequencing in a side A, side B thing, or were you thinking of it as a compact disc?
Yeah, it was definitely side A, side B, and it was vinyl for sure. But cassettes were even more. Cassettes were like your kind of CDs became. That was the more popular format. Vinyl was it did pretty well, but it wasn't. It was kind of, it had started to get overtaken by cassettes. Yeah, and then the CDs. I mean, look back, and we were lucky in hindsight, because now, like, I don't know what we would have done in the streaming age. Fortunately, vinyl is coming back, and it's pretty healthy. But you're not, no one's selling the records that they used to.
Oh yeah, man, for sure. Like physical units and commercial radio play in a certain era would have been a lifeline.
It was, and also Much Music. I
Yeah.
gotta say, Much Music helped us a whole pile, and so now it's like, okay, yeah, I saw this band on TikTok, and they have 1.5 million views and everything, but it's just like, what does that buy you? I mean, there's as far as like career wise opportunities. There's some acts that um, it does do them well, and they do well from it, but not like it used to be. I think we're luckier to have come through the period that we came through, which involved everything switching to CDs. But at least people were still interested in an album, and we always still do look at it as side A, side B.
Yeah, that's cool. I kind of suspected as much, but it's good to know. Okay, a few memorable, a few notable performances I wanted to ask you about. Was the first time you guys played Maple Leaf Gardens opening for Rush?
It was, yeah.
So was Rush a band that you liked, and was Maple Leaf Gardens like a goal for you guys, or something that seemed realistic?
Uh, yeah, maybe semi-realistic. We were playing like the concert hall
Right.
in Toronto, Masonic Temple, and that was a big venue, 2,500. And yeah, moving up to arenas probably wasn't anything we were, certainly nothing we were shooting for. We just thought, let's just keep, hey, Road Apple's doing great, and we were like, fuck, this is so cool. But then, Rush asked us to play, and yes, we were big fans of Rush. Matter of fact, we loved their music, but we looked up to them in the way that, they started very lights. They did their absolute own thing, and they had their own sound, and they didn't appear to listen to anybody, and just went ahead and did it. And they taught us about charity too. That was a big charity gig that they did every year.
Oh.
And so, yeah, we got to meet them that night. It was the first time. And when we went on the stage, we all felt like we were just playing like half hour, 40 minutes. And so it was just kind of a bang, bang set. And we all felt comfortable up there, and we were all got to express our gratitude to to Getty and Alex and Neil, and it was just like, wow, we're just in heaven. It was probably, I don't know how long after. Yeah, it was certainly a year or two, probably 2 or 3 years before we actually played there on our own. But no, it wouldn't have been a particular goal at the time, or maybe not realistic. But we were getting big enough that we were playing, the Commodore and you know, sort of the bigger clubs across the country, and so yeah, it was pretty exciting.
That's a thing in Canada that I also wanted to ask before, is like when you're starting out and you're a band and you're selling, even say 50 to 400 or 500 tickets. It's like you can play some sort of smaller markets. You can play Brandon and Red Deer and Prince George and stuff. But then when you get to a like as it keeps growing and growing and growing, it's like you're playing bigger shows in larger markets. Is that fair to say? And did you miss the secondary markets as the band got more popular?
It's fair to say, and yeah, we kept trying, and we kept the secondary markets in there. I mean, you know, I would say right through the 2000s, and when we were playing, and through the late 90s too, I guess. But all the, like, our first arena tour was fully completely, and we were playing the small arenas like Calgary. We weren't playing the Saddle Dome. We were playing the Max Bell Arena, because they have all these kind of side arenas that are more for your either junior hockey arenas or, these little Pacific Coliseum, instead of whatever GM Place was known at in Vancouver back then. We were playing Pacific Coliseum. And anyway, so we did move up to the big arenas, but we tried to keep the Prince George's in there and Red Deer. And, there's quite a few of those secondary markets across the country that have a little arena. A lot of them were barns.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, but it was like, well, it's right, we're right in the area. Why wouldn't we throw that gig in? So we did try to keep them in, but you are right. It's kind of like, whatever the if you're playing all those big places like the ACC eventually, and it's a little tough to go to Brantford and London has a big arena, but Brantford or Burlington or Oakville, I don't think we ever played there. That the venues just aren't there. And anyway, but I would point out that we weren't an arena band the whole time. Like, there was an arena tour, I think it was for Music at Work, which I think was very late 90s, and that's when Pro Tools came in. That was a difficult record for us because you could change everything. So we just took so long to get it done.
Mm-hmm.
And by that, if anyone wonders, it's like you can play something and take that in like milliseconds, or back then maybe 5 seconds, and plop it into the second verse and plop it into the first verse, and it's just not. It's not right, even though we all use it now,
of course,
and everyone does. But you got to think right around it. You're writing a song in a computer. You got to write that song first,
mm-hmm.
and then record it. But yeah. Anyway, so we started to notice up in the nosebleeds. Mm-hmm. Not as many people as were not selling out like crazy. Like, there's still tickets available up there. And so we were like, screw this, let's
mm-hmm.
go back to the theaters. And so we went back to the theaters, bigger theaters, of course, still theaters, Massey Hall and Queen Elizabeth in Vancouver, whatever the theaters were. And we thought, we got to build up the crowd. So we do a couple nights in the theater, and we got to build it up again. And we got to make a good record, and we got to just, and so it was just kind of like, we always wanted it to be sold out,
Yeah.
And so there was a long period of time where we weren't in the arenas. And then lo and behold, to be honest, we did fully, completely revisit tour and sold out the arenas. And then we did our last tour, and obviously that happened too. And so, it was kind of always an ongoing discussion. And that was the case in Europe, for sure. And certainly the same in America. We were constantly discussing, where should we play? How did it go last time? Can we move up? The Fillmore in San Francisco, that's where we landed, and we probably we're as proud of that as anything. We probably sold that place out probably 6 times over a number of years, and we had to work our way up. We played shit clubs in San Francisco. It took a long time for us to get popular there without radio play, although there was a radio station that did. I'm contradicting myself. There was. KFOG was a radio station that played us a bit. Chicago, we worked our way up. At every single city in the States, we worked our way up to at least a sellout at a nice theater or the biggest club. And hey, that's all we can do. If you're not going to be in Rolling Stone or on MTV,
yeah,
it's like we said, fuck it. We'll do it ourselves.
So you didn't like grind America, like, town to town, even small clubs. Like, you kind of focused in on the markets that were working for you and just hammered those.
No, we grinded America. We
really?
spent
Hey,
way more time down there.
No shit.
Oh yeah, way more time. And a lot of times in a van, but eventually we could afford to take a bus down there, and we're pulling up to like little club in St. Louis in a bus.
Yeah.
And our tour bus driver, who's from down south, he's like, "You mind if I ask you something?" And we're like, "Yeah, sure. We're just waiting for sound check." Yeah. "How come you're not playing over that arena right over there?" And I'm like, well, we were all like, well, it's hard to explain, but you need to be known and popular, and we're not. And he's like, well, you should just go play there. It's gonna be a lot more people. And I'm like, well, the people they aren't going to show up. So anyway, but we hammered the States more than anything. And I think what made us kind of dial back a bit on grinding the States is we went over to Europe, and Holland especially. It was like, what? You're Canadian? All the rooms were full. And this was, in the early 90s. So we started out with full rooms. And there's so many homesick Canadians. That's another factor, in play in London, England, and any Canadian band that comes over, especially if they're known, somewhat, like Blue Rodeo or us or Bare Naked Ladies or whomever. Well, the Canadians are going to come out because they want to be home, and so that's the next best thing. And so then we started touring Europe as much as we were America and Canada. So we just had a nice balance and a different sort of career story in every single city, certainly in America, but in a lot of cities in Europe too.
You guys are like selling out big rooms in Canada, and then you're still going down and playing small clubs in the States.
Yep, pretty much.
Yeah, man, I love that. I love that.
Yeah, it keeps you on your toes. It keeps it really interesting. I mean, it's way tougher to play an arena than it is to play a small club. I mean, playing a small club is like it's full, everyone's right there. It's like, the energy. In an arena, you got to kind of reach the people up a couple of levels, and so you really just got to. That was a learning curve too, but I think we were very lucky to have all sorts of gigs that were kind of changing all the time, and we would cross the border and play two or three different ones in a few days, like a big one, a small one, then a big one.
You guys end up on Saturday Night Live in 1995. Dan Aykroyd introduces you to America, even though you guys have been touring down there for a number of years.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a different level. Like this is Saturday Night Live, mid 90s. Can you tell me anything about that gig and that day?
Yeah, it was surreal. It was awesome. Aykroyd, who was a friend of ours, insisted that we play, and had to threaten to rescind his appearance, because I think there was pushback. Um, and why wouldn't there be? Because we were doing nothing nationally in the States. And he said, no, I'm not on. He was kind of co-hosting with John Goodman. And anyway, he insisted. So there we were. And, we were and are forever grateful for that. But he's a good friend of ours. And anyway, so it was like awesome. And, we I think we did okay, and we did well. We had an awareness that it would be kind of a big deal for a lot of Canadians on a Saturday night. SNL was super popular at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And we did. I've heard tell of people thinking we should have played maybe New Orleans is Sinking and Blow It I Do. But it was just like, well, this is our new record. So we played, Grace 2 and Nautical. We had just put Day for Night out. And so we played those ones. Those were the two songs we wanted to play. And anyway, I don't think that had anything to do with why nothing really happened after that. I mean, we went to the party after, which lasted till about 3 a.m. I guess they have a party every Saturday Night Live at some cool club in New York, and then we all got on the bus and we drove to St. Louis. Ironically, I brought St. Louis up a couple times, and we played a club called the World. It was like the Something World, but it was a total dive, and there was maybe 15 people there the next night. So it was like, okay, we all realized, okay, nothing's going to come out of that, but we're all happy we did it. But it wasn't. It wasn't the explosion any of us might have dreamt it would be.
My buddy told me basically similar story. He was on Letterman with Kathleen Edwards, and then they played a couple small clubs in the next nights, and it was like, didn't seem to move the needle.
Yeah, we never played Letterman, but I saw many people, Canadian bands mostly, but play and saw it not move the needle. Paul Schaefer had a problem with us for some reason. I don't know what it was, because he's from Thunder Bay, who our main road manager, he was from there. May he rest in peace, Dave Howell.
Mm-hmm.
And we always thought Paul would have his son. You're a Canadian, come on. And never happened. But, we found that out from Saturday Night Live. It's not just something like that moved the needle, unless, sometimes I've seen, like I saw Kid Rock, of all people. I'm not a fan,
mm-hmm.
but when we played Woodstock '99, and he's got the smaller some DJ guy with him, and a fur coat on backstage, and it's like, who's this guy? And he went on early too. And anyway, he kind of seemed to bust through. That was his breaking point, but you never know where one's going to happen, and it never happened with us. We were always just, let's just build it up.
Well, it's a hell of a performance of Grace 2. That's the only one I've seen from the SNL. And sort of back to the pigeon camera thing with Grace 2, I wanted to know who wrote that riff, if the bass player is following the riff, or if he wrote the riff and you're following him.
I don't even know. I mean, I think that's the most kind of that is directly out of a jam. And I remember the setting. We practiced in this place called the Woolen Mill that Dave Powell, I just mentioned, our road manager, he lived in there, and it was kind of like a warehousey thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember playing Grace 2. I would guess that Gord was playing that riff, and I joined in on it, because we're playing almost the exact same thing in the kind of main that riff. Yeah. And I got to give that one to Gord, but I'm only guessing.
That's another one where it's like all three of you are playing together, and then it's definitely a jam. And I totally had the thought is like, this is a jam that's like, maybe it sounded different, after other passes of it, and this is the one that you've landed on.
Yeah, that was our jammiest number, I would say. Yeah. Like from the writing of it. we just went with it, which was good because it was kind of leading into um, slightly experimental record, Day for Night, and that was kind of leading the charge and would have been one of the early ones we wrote for it, and then followed that up with that in mind.
So you got a new solo record, came out in July, right?
Yes.
Called Guess What? Is this your third solo release?
It is, yeah. I kind of tried to hide the first one, but yeah, it's the third. So long time ago, like 2010 was Fix This Head, 2013 was Not Guilty, and now is Guess What?
How did the whole record come about, and when did you record it?
Yeah, it was just we recorded it in November, 8 days. November passed. It's going to be a year soon, but I had all the songs written, which I wrote in September and October mostly, except for a couple that came from, maybe the past year or two, that I finished in September, October. I would just send it to the guys in my band, who I kind of handpicked, and they're all buddies, Kingston guys that work full time in other things, but are really nice musicians and great guys. They were pretty enthusiastic, and so yeah, it just came out of a gig that I was offered. And my tendency would be to say, nah, I don't want to do that. Like I got to put a band together. It was just kind of like I was in that kind of mode. And really I'd been in that mode pretty much since Gord died. Like I was just like, okay, I've done my thing, and I just wasn't really looking forward to much musically. And then it was like, I put the band together, asked them all, they all said yes, and we rehearsed, and then we played the show, and it went well, and I enjoyed it in spite of myself. And then my wife actually just started getting on me, like, you got to write songs, make a record. And I'm like, oh, God, I don't know. What am I going to talk about? And anyway, so I was able to do it, and I think that's where Guess What is, like I'm basically probably saying that to myself, like, guess what, you actually enjoy this, you idiot.
Well, it's got to be different pressure now, right? Like it's your band, it's your name, it's your timeline, even though you said you had a gig you had to get ready for, but it's got to feel a little bit more free.
Well, yes, it does, but at the same time, there's more dread involved, or there certainly was more dread. Just like, what am I thinking? I've talked to Gord Sinclair about it too, because he did the same thing maybe 3 months before I did. His record came out in the spring, and he toured somewhat, like playing gigs, and I had to form a band and all of it. And he'd be like, we'd be on the golf course, and he'd be like, I am so done with this, it's just ridiculous being front and center, and I'm like, I know what you mean, man. I just dread any gig with Paul Langlois on it, like it just was so much easier in the hip, and like just pressure wise. And but I'm over that. We played I think we just finished our 8th gig, so not a ton, but 8 kind of festival gigs over the course of the summer, like from July through till a couple of days ago. And so it was only a gig every 2 weeks. And I gradually started liking it. And gradually, I think, I hope, and I've been told by biased people like family and friends that I appear more confident, more like I'm enjoying myself, as opposed to like deer in the headlights, kind of like, oh God, I forgot to smile, or just kind of. It takes some doing to be front and center. Like it really, on my part, it certainly does, and I honestly, I think on a lot of people's part, like there's just some natural born front people.
Oh yeah, well,
I'm not one of them.
Yeah. I mean, you just need some hours. That's all.
Pardon me?
You just need some hours up there.
Well, that's it turned out for me. I needed some hours, and I needed to sort of just really accept. So now, like we played, they were all outdoor shows, but the last couple we played, I'm I'm okay. I'm nervous, but I'm okay right before the show. Like I'm not like, oh my god, oh this is so brutal. Which I was like that for the first probably 3 shows, where it's just like, oh, what was I ever thinking to do this? You idiot! You had a great career. Why are you ruining it?
What is writing like for you when you're writing for your own record? I mean, you were in this collaborative band for so long. So what's it like? What's writing look like for you?
Well, I had written songs when I joined the band. I was starting to write songs, and then wrote some lyrics before, um, before Gord expressed Downey expressed the desire to write all the lyrics, which was fair enough, and we all thought that. It's like, it's fair enough. You got to sing them.
Yeah.
At it. And then I did the 2 solo records. The one was just on my own, and then the second one was with the band. And so I had done it before, but it just really kind of have to coax a song out of myself. And in order to do that, the only thing that seems to work for me is creating a deadline. And so it's like, okay, I got to sing this song at this wedding of my buddies or whatever. Or I'm going in the studio November 8th. And that's what happened this time. It's like, okay, that's coming. So I am desperate now, and I need to come up with songs, and I just can't not do it. And so, I don't, I'm not someone who does that kind of thing every day. I really only do it if I set a deadline for myself, and that's how I did it. And as far as what I'm going on about, I'm just going on about life, I think, and getting older, and the kids getting older, and just everything. The Hip would still be playing, obviously, if Gord were still here, and so that, I'm sure that's touched on here and there. So I was actually, it was easier because music comes far easier to me than lyrics. So the lyrics are the work, and things just kind of happened to settle in nicely, where I was like, okay, yeah, I can believe this one. And so just kind of, again, just got a bit lucky, but also the deadline, and having musical ideas that I liked for myself, that helped a lot.
A few tunes I wanted to ask you about. Been Waiting. Yeah, if you tell me where these ones kind of came from, and what you're thinking, and did you sing your own harmony on that song?
No, that's Greg Ball singing that harmony.
Hell of a job, because I swore it was you.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I did. In the headphones, I was like, God, maybe he sang this one himself.
No, that's Greg Ball, and I think he'd take it as a compliment.
It's meant that way.
Yeah, no, he is just a great guy and individual and hilarious, and he's a great backup singer. And Been Waiting was just, again, that was a deadline. I got asked, weirdly, by John McDermott, who's, I don't know if you know him, but he's like Irish tenor sort of guy, Canadian guy, but he wanted to do a gig with me, and so it was like 6 months away, and I was like, I had told Joanne, my wife, maybe, this is years ago, maybe I'll write a song, or maybe a few songs, and play, because I was going to open for him. Anyway, the day before, I said I didn't write one. And then she was like, oh, that's okay. And anyway, so it was freezing rain, and I was outside under an umbrella, and I had no choice. And so I wrote a song about waiting for inspiration, because I honestly thought, no, you don't have to pick up a guitar. You can a song will come to you. And it didn't at all. Like, not even close.
Right.
So I had to go back inside and just desperately churn one out. And then I kind of updated it. I totally forgot about that song as we were about to record. And then I was like, oh, right, I did write one about a year ago for that McDermott thing. So, yeah.
That's cool. Next one, I Feel Real.
Yeah, that one. I was actually honestly thinking about talking to my mom, who passed away a couple of years ago, but she was the best advice giver I ever came across. And hopefully, there's so many people out there who feel the same way about their mom. That it was just like, so I was just started with that. Just like, okay, I'm talking to mom and I've got an issue, or maybe it's her that has the issue. So I kind of seemed to turn it on itself a little bit. And almost me giving her advice, but I'm sure it's her giving me the advice.
Nice. And the last song on the record is the title track. I like that move, by the way, and it's a hell of a performance. It's been that whole outro section, like you and the band. That's like a really great way to close a record. Can you tell me about that song?
Oh, thanks. Yeah, we were kind of struggling with it. I didn't really have like lyrics right down. I didn't have them really written down. And it was just this kind of plunket, like there's a piano thing on there that I actually played on my computer, and it's just like barrel, do now, whatever, however the notes go, but it's just like same thing over and over. And I started kind of just rapping to it, and we were in the studio, and it was getting down to the wire. We had a couple of days left, and we were only at 8 songs, and I wanted at least 10. And so we had dinner, and it was like, okay, well, let's try it a bit more loosey goosey, and really, and try and hammer something out when we get back. And so we got back to the studio, like we're just at a restaurant. The Hip Studio is a bathhouse, and it's in Bath, Ontario, half hour west of Kingston. And anyway, we're in a restaurant there. We get back to the studio, and 4 of my buddies were there in the kitchen, and no one had texted me. Like, they just kind of surprised. They just wanted to come out and listen, but no one had said, "Hey, is it okay if we come out to the studio?" Anyway, I was happy they were there, but then realizing, oh, we're working on a song that it hasn't really happened yet. So with those, we did 3 takes, and by the 3rd take, which is the one we picked, I was thinking, you can't see in the control room. So in the player's room, you can't see the control room. So I was just picturing my 4 friends bored out of their trees. And so I started to take it up a notch, and that started Greg Ball laughing, who was right beside me. And then, so that made me take it up even further. And I think the band kind of rode along with me. And we just decided to somewhat to take it over the top, because I was singing, significantly out of my range, and just trying to make it some type of exciting song. So, and then, we heard it and we all really liked it. So we left it there.
Tell me about your guys. Who are the guys? What are their names? What do they play?
Well, Greg Ball, as mentioned, he sings backups and plays guitar. Joe Carscallon is also on guitar, and he would be taking the solo role, but also rhythm, a lot of mainly rhythm, but he's playing the solos. Matt Mulvihill is a bass player who's been a friend for a long time, and was in bands along with Bill Anglin. He wasn't in bands with Bill Anglin, but Bill Anglin, the drummer, both Matt and Bill were in bands, through their 20s, but then they both kind of veered off. Matt is a firefighter, and Bill and weren't really playing officially with anyone. They've just kind of messed around kind of on their own for the most part since they were, 25 years ago or 20 years ago. And so they all just seem to click. And to this day, we're still having fun. And even though we don't have gigs probably for another couple of months, we still rehearse once a week just to get together and have fun and make sure we continue to be tight is the goal.
That's great. And you guys got a string of shows coming up end of November, early December. You want to tell me about that?
Yeah, that's with Skydiggers, and they've been friends for so long, like with the Hip, and we hung out with them when Gord and I lived in Toronto, and they were starting up near about the same time as us. I'm not exactly sure who was first, but and I played with them a few times. Did kind of a couple of little runs of shows where just me and playing my songs, but also playing Skydeer's songs, like just an appearance, like 5-6 songs in their set. And so we just remained friends, and we were just chatting, that they have a new record coming out, and mine was out, our soul, my soul, and so we just said, why don't we do a little run of dates? I mean, I think they're going to do a lot of dates, but the city's worked out that it works for the Skydiggers and it works for us. So it's, Peterborough, Belleville, Kingston, Ottawa. It's 4 nights in a row at like basically little theaters.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, November 29, 30 and December 1 and 2. And it's going to be fun. They're all beautiful people in Skydiggers. They have a bigger band now, and I know them all well, and we're all big fans of theirs, and looking forward to that.
Any plans that you're able to talk about for next year or moving forward with the band?
Yeah, it's kind of. I mean, yes, the band is going to stay together. If everything went great, now, I haven't written one word or note, but if everything went great, we could have another record out, make it at some point over the winter and spring, and we'll try and do the festivals again. It's kind of like a dip your toe in the water. Like, the great thing about the festivals for me is, and for us, is that, the tickets aren't on me. The festival does what the festival does, and so they're selling the tickets. So basically, you're getting paid, and you have a slot on the show, whether it's at 3 in the afternoon or 9 at night, and you play your hour or however long the set is. You get your money. It's a positive experience. People are watching. It's like Mariposa. Well, of course, there's people going to be there, and we played there this summer. We played great little festivals, and it's kind of like, okay, well, it's kind of, as opposed to, if you try and head out on a tour and sell tickets, like we all know, well, hey, you got to sell the tickets, and it's all based on that, and you have to care about the tickets, and you really got to, keep up to date on the tickets. And the festival thing, it just seems like a great kind of way to go for us for now, because we don't need to be on the road. I don't need to be on the road anymore. And so you can kind of pick and choose if there's offers there. Apparently there's been some good feedback. And so I think if nothing really excellent happens live-wise, like offers or whatever, I think we take another run at festivals. But all we did was Ontario this year. I would love to come out west, and I'd love to go out east. And just play, the folk festivals. Now you don't have to be a folk band anymore, like it's the rock bands that play it, and like everybody plays them. And so my personal desire would be to get, 10 or 15 festival gigs. Doesn't matter, 1 o'clock, sure, noon or 6 p.m. or whatever, and just play some shows like that. So that's a kind of fallback tentative plan.
Someone tells you you're playing at noon, and you can say, fuck, I played Woodstock at noon, no problem.
Well, that's what we did. We went on right at noon, and we were okay with it. It was just like, hey, we used to, where you have discrepancy. Oh, we're supposed to be on last. Mm-hmm. And, oh no, but the Hip is supposed to be on last. We would always choose before. Always. Oh no, you go ahead. You close. You follow us.
Yeah, good luck.
Well, you said that, not me.
Paul, thanks so much, man. It's really great to chat with you. I appreciate it.
You too, Sean. And yeah, let Corb know we're coming, and then we'll certainly look out for you in the spring for the full band shows.
Yeah, we'll do. I'll send you an email. I'll let you know when that's all happening.
Yeah, do that anytime.
Beauty, take care, man.
Okay, you too, Sean. Good talking to you.
Well, folks, that's pretty good. That's a pretty good one, eh? My thanks to Paul Langlois for taking the time to have a chat and share a little bit about his story and his career with us here today. For more on Paul Langlois, you can go to thehip.com or paullangloisband.bandcamp.com. His latest record, Guess What?, was released this past July, and of course you can find that and his 2 previous solo efforts on Spotify or wherever you're streaming for a nominal monthly fee, or maybe you don't pay for it at all. I don't know your life. Our logo was created by Boots Graham. Music courtesy of Sean Burns and Lost Country, The Divorcees, and Skinny Dick. From local legends to regional stars, to the cream of the Canadian crop. Find it all here on the Northern Report. Thanks for tuning in, folks. Have a great week.
Hey,
bud, you got anything left in the tank?
I just want to feel seen, heard, and valued.